the last binomial, and it's about multicultural approach. Yes. So Dr. Kathleen Harvey. Mara was a senior leader in wealth management and has worked for 21 years in the financial industry. Today, she's the founder and CEO of smartwaytostart.com, and is a pioneering financial parenting and financial literacy for children ages 5 to 10. Please join us on. Join me, please. Oh, are you good? Yes? Wonderful. Yes. And Beatrice Reniers. Beatrice Reniers, on dit Beatrice Reniers. Ah, Reniers. Ah bah voilà, tu vois, tu m'as dit Reniers, hein, c'est ça. Excusez-moi, je suis vraiment désolé, mais on m'avait... Bon. So with an artistic background, Beatrice Reniers has spent most of her professional life in the development and animation of cultural and tourist sites. At the Compagnie des Alpes, a French company where she joined in 2000, she directed the Musée Grévin, Paris, for 10 years. She became CEO of Grévin International by opening 4 museums in Montreal, Prague, Seoul, as well as the Chaplin's World Museum in Vevey, Switzerland, of which she has been the general manager since 2019. Please, give a welcome, Beatrice. Wonderful. Oh, there you go. Wait, I'll bring it back here. Voila. And you have your mic here? All right. How are you doing? Yes?
So well.
Yes, well?
So interesting to hear, Michael.
Really, really interesting.
Nice jobs.
You have a passion
nice
for jams?
experiences. I'm jealous.
Okay. So multicultural approach. How do you recognize yourself in this definition, Mara?
So my entire life has been a mix of cultures, both from a private perspective, but also from a professional one. I grew up in England, and in England I was the Swiss girl. I moved back to Switzerland, to Ticino, and I was the English girl. I then studied in the French part of Switzerland, and I was the Tessinoise. I ended up working in Zurich, and I clearly didn't fit in any boxes. And my joke with my kids is that I only really got hired not because of my PhD, but because of the fact that I spoke 4 languages and they needed somebody to do a lot of translation. So that's the standing gag in the family. But my professional path also took me all across Europe, and it's been a huge advantage actually to speak languages and to be able to communicate with people in their languages, because you realize how a language is a transmission of culture, and understanding those differences and those nuances in all the people that you encounter and the way they look at the world, the lens through which they look at the world, is something that I'm just very passionate about. So I must say Europe is my home.
Yeah, totally understand. Same here. What about you, Beatrice?
Have been working so many times in different countries with different people, because when I set up some museum, it was in Korea, in Canada, in Czech Republic, so I was obliged to understand those people, because if I did not do that, it was really impossible to set up the museum, because those museum was about the story of the country. So it was quite a challenge. And about that, I was obliged to change my perspective within my own setting. I had to be in the feet of the other people to understand. So I think that I never asked myself what it is about cultural approach, because I didn't think about it. When I saw the question, I say, yes, of course. I was always in that kind of thing of multicultural approach. And even if I have very bad English, but now I'm living in Switzerland for 3 years, I don't use English language. But why I thought that I was always in a very important multicultural approach.
Yeah, same here. Within the framework of your international experiences, the position of women is very different from one continent to another. How do you see it?
So my journey through the financial industry took me to understand why there were so many gender biases within the industry, right? Not just looking at how many women are in finance and how do we get more women into STEM and into STEM with 2 M's, so the second M being money. But also understanding why was the industry not really focusing on female clients and looking at that globally, right? How do you transform an industry to say, look, you're missing out on 50% of the equation, and understanding what were women's roles in different cultures, in different regions of the world? What were women's roles in managing money? Because money is one of the final barriers to gender equality, right? We've come a long way on health. We've come a long way on education. We've come a long way on political representation. But in terms of advancing gender equality from an economic perspective, access to capital and access to managing money was a hurdle. And you realize there are massive differences culturally in every country. You can't even generalize it per region. And we were talking previously about Switzerland, and I found extremely fascinating to realize that in Switzerland, it's barely 32 years that women can open a bank account without their husband's signature. 30 years, it's like I was 18, hey. So, you know, it's like I didn't know when I was 18 that I was lucky because somebody just changed the law and I would be able to open my own bank account as a woman. So those differences are anchored in the history of the different cultures, of the different countries. And you realize when you're trying to drive a transformation, one size doesn't fit all. It doesn't fit, it doesn't fit in one country, but let alone if you're trying to do this across an industry on a global scale.
Incredible. No, it's incredible to realize that. I mean, we know that, right? I mean, it's. I was born in '64. The world was a different world at the time, but we see there is an evolution, and it kind of gives us hope, I guess. So, what about you, Beatrice?
The framework was very different because when I was abroad and setting up the project of building museum, when the people saw that I was the general manager of the project, sometimes
really
they were surprised because it is really the world of the men, because building, there are not so many women. So when they saw me arriving, they were a little bit suspicious about my quality and
maybe
my
they were
skills.
scared.
No, not so much. Thank you. But it takes a long time to be to take the place, because they have to hear me, and then after some months they trust me.
Excellent. Are women not more gifted than men in international negotiations or multicultural contexts? Case of SMI, UN. What do you think about that?
I think the pandemic has shown us very clearly that female leadership in many countries helped those countries tackle the challenges of the pandemic. But we're also seeing very strong leadership emerge in terms of tackling climate challenges that we face. I mean, just look at the leadership that we're seeing in the Caribbean at this time. I think it's really moving the world. And there are some very, very strong women there that are putting a strong focus on climate, on people, on education, on infrastructure. And I think that other world leaders could look upon that and, take a big bite out of that cake as well. I think female leadership has one core characteristic that makes it so strong, and that is that it is life-serving. I think it is not just about optimization for the sake of more is more. It really is about what can you do so that the future is going to be better. better for you, for your family, for your society, for your community, but also for the planet. I don't think that many female leaders think in terms of trade-off. They think in terms of how do we reconcile things so that growth is possible, but a life-serving approach is possible as well.
Do you want my point of view?
Yes, I would love to have your point of view.
Smaller than yours. No, about negotiation, it was something that I'm used about that. And it was, of course, easier in Europe because when I was in Korea or in Emirates, for example, in Qatar, I remember everybody was very polite with me. Yes, yes, yes. And after that, they don't trust me and they don't want to negotiate with me. And they ask for my chief, who is your head? Mm-hmm. So I said, you have to negotiate with me, sorry. So it was, I think sometimes it was difficult, but at the end, we just arrived it. So you have to take, you have to be confident in you and yourself that I trust now everything about me, it's okay.
Well, the most powerful politician in Europe has been a woman for many years, right? Angela Merkel, right? And respected, throughout the world. So she was, I don't know what's going to happen without her. Yeah, it's time for the question already. Do you have so what?
Shall I go first?
Yes.
So, given that you work in a space which is really culture by default, by nature, diversity that comes with culture, how do you look at ethnic diversity and the whole approach to Black Lives Matter and beyond? Do you see this also as an accelerator for other forms, like gender diversity more broadly? What are you experiencing in your field?
It was very difficult. No, really. No, because sometimes I didn't thought about that. So the question was very interesting for me. I think that to have a focus on minority or communities, sometimes that can help to reduce the gap between men and women, of course, because it's a focus, you have the light on you. But sometimes I really don't know if it helps or not, or if it accelerates. I think there are many other things to accelerate. So I'm not sure about the answer. I must say, very honestly, that I don't know, really.
Thank you.
And Beatrice, your question?
I have a question, of course, for Mara. The education of women is done from childhood. What advice should be given to parents so that their daughters are brought up with a feeling of equality? That you know very well this question.
I love that question. Thank you for asking it. So it was interesting because I think it was Miriam who before was saying, the younger generation is growing up with a strong sense of confidence and entitlement. And I do see that. And yet I'm concerned about one thing. They grow up believing they're equal to their peers. And all I can say is, I had the same thought 40 years ago. When I was 10 years old, I had no notion of inequality or structural barriers. So while, of course, we want our children to grow up feeling equal, feeling empowered, I think that if they don't know that there is a problem, right? If we don't tell them, look, we want you to grow up equal, but actually the world isn't there yet. We need you to know there are problems, because if you don't know there are problems, they're also going to spend the first 30 years of their lives thinking everything is fine, and they wake up by the time they're 35 and they're like, wait, something isn't right, and I'm going to become a feminist or an activist. So can we not do both raise our children with this innate sense of equality and diversity and inclusion, but at the same time tell them the world isn't there. The world's going to need another 200 years for economic gender equality. That's 7 generations. So our daughters' 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 daughters will still be fighting for equality.
Do you want to talk about something else?
Yes, I had another question for Mara. I like the answer.
Thank you.
Are you in favor of quotas for women in position of responsibility and management? So important.
Okay, this is a really tough one because it risks becoming a little bit of a long debate. Short answer.
We have time? 6 minutes.
6 minutes, jolly good. I'll use 5.5 of them. I am in favor of quotas because I believe we need them to accelerate change. Not because I think as such it's great that we need quotas, but because we've seen that in countries that have introduced them, you force structural change. And why do I say this? One of my absolutely favorite quotes is by Professor Kimmel, who is a sociologist, who says, "Privilege is invisible to those who behold it." Mm-hmm. And I'm a big believer in that. And I don't think that stereotypes and inequalities remain in place just because people are evil. It's often because they don't see the problem. They don't experience that problem. Like we as white people don't experience the problems that people of color experience. And therefore, how can I put myself in the shoes of somebody else? So if you don't find structural ways to overcome structural barriers, you're just doing change management by wishful hoping. And I'm in the camp of take action.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I have the same, if I can talk and just say something about multicultural. My wife, she's half French and half Senegalese, and my children are a mixture of being a quarter Senegalese, a quarter French, a quarter, well, Swiss. They're Swiss, but they're also German and Spanish. And it's amazing that they do still feel, even they have like a really bright skin, they do feel racism. It's incredible. And I'm shocked, and I'm witnessing this, quite often, and wherever you go. I mean, in America, it's something that everybody talks about it every day. You black, you white, you black. They live with it, and they have quotas. And the quotas did change things, I guess. There, I saw it in the movie business, and suddenly we had those big stars, black stars there, and the kids could relate to them and admire them. And they gave them faith, like having a black president. But I think maybe it started from there, changing, being aware of exactly what you said, to just things, you carrying something without caring that, the white people towards the black people don't know how lucky they have, or how life is easier for them towards the other community. And it's good to remind them that they have some kind of privilege, and we don't really know why today, So thank you for... Anything else you want to add?
It's okay.
No, thank you.
Are you sure?
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.